The Truth About Goblins, Chapter 15.
I still don't know how you managed it, said Saphira. I really hope you didn't dip into the shop's account to get these tickets.
Timothy smiled. Don't you worry, it wasn't a hasty decision or anything like that. I knew you wouldn't go for something this extravagant, not if it was costly. He adjusted his tie. And as long as we return our fancy clothes after the show, the whole evening would have barely cost a thing.
Very well, she said jokingly. I suppose I'll let you get away with it. Just this once.
The odd couple attracted curious looks as they made their way towards the theater. As they continued, however, the questioning glances vanished. The closer the pair came to their destination, the better the crowd was dressed. I have to admit, said Timothy, that I feel a little out of place.
I know the feeling, agreed Saphira. But we've done a pretty good job of camouflaging ourselves.
I'm in camouflage. He smiled. But you're not. You're just beautiful. She laughed nervously.
We covered that already.
Right, he said. Sorry, I mean, not that I...
Oh!
She grabbed his arm and pointed ahead.
Timothy, just look at it.
Rising above their surroundings, the old theater stood out like a white castle in the cavern's dark expanse. A bottomless moat separated the structure from the rest of the market, a narrow bridge leading up to the gate. Embedded in the far wall of the cave, the grand facade was all that was visible, its windows glowing with soft light from within. And aside from the windows, there were rich red banners and garlands adorning the massive columns stretching upwards to the ceiling from the darkness below. The whole theater towered over them as they drew closer, the narrow bridge in sight. The string of lights woven into the railing made the ladies' dresses shimmer and the men's suits shine. The guests lined up side by side in front of a booth by the bridge. The woman standing behind it checked their tickets with a nod and a smile before motioning for the next couple to come forward. At last, they were on the bridge itself. Saphira looked over the railing, drawing back as a gust of wind rose up from below. The chasm seemed endless from where she stood. The mines, said Timothy, pulling up beside her. I never knew you could see them from here. It's quite a sight.
It looks a lot different from the bridge, she agreed. It's kind of eerie.
It's really not that bad, he said. Not when you're down there with a lantern, anyway.
I suppose you're used to it, always going after those tea leaves.
Yes, he admitted. Really, I ought to think about going back down sometime soon. We're running low on ingredients. He gave her arm a gentle tug. But let's not discuss work. Not tonight, in any case. We should find our seats before the show begins. She relented and let him guide her into the theater. She gasped again as they entered, stunned by the lavishness before her. Rich, ornate carpeting covered the foyer, leading the crowd into a wide corridor where the floor turned to shimmering marble. Reflected on the smooth surface were the chandeliers, their glittering light illuminating the passage to the next room. Exquisite tapestries draped the windowless walls, and the heavy oak doors framing the entryways boasted detailed and intricate engravings. Every inch of the grand theater displayed an artist's touch.
Beautiful,
whispered Saphira, at a loss for any other word. Her eyes wandered over each wall of every room they passed, eagerly taking in the opulence. Timothy tapped her on the shoulder and pointed to their left, towards a large doorway. The ballroom, he said, smiling as her eyes lit up. I think there's a dance of some sort after the show.
Do you really think so?
Even as they passed, Saphira couldn't keep her eyes off the doors, as if they would swing open any second and let her peek inside.
I hope you're right. I've never seen a ballroom before.
It should be quite exciting, he agreed, pulling at his collar. He seemed tense. Attempting to put him at ease, she squeezed his arm.
Don't be so nervous, Timothy. No one's judging you.
She smiled as his eyes met hers.
I couldn't think of a better birthday gift.
He seemed to relax, if only slightly. It really is something, isn't it? It wasn't long after they had passed the ballroom that they arrived at the auditorium, the heart of the old theater. Much like she had imagined, Saphira found herself lost in a landscape of seats, with rows down the center as well as luxury booths flanking the room overhead. What she did not expect was the enormity of the stage and the elegance of the auditorium in its entirety. She would have stood there for hours just taking it all in had she forgotten the guests still waiting to be seated behind her. Dazed, she let Timothy lead her to their assigned row.
This is so exciting, she said, taking her seat. I never thought I would get to experience something like this.
Timothy sat down beside her. Someone who works as hard as you do should have a treat once in a while, especially on your birthday.
By the way, she said, how did you know it was my birthday? I don't recall ever mentioning it.
Oh, I had help, believe me. I didn't come up with everything by myself. He looked down at his shoes. I'm just glad it all worked out.
Well, it took me by surprise, all this coming from you.
She regretted her words instantly and added,
Not that I don't think of you as being capable of, surprises and such.
She felt the heat rise to her face.
I mean, it's just, I didn't mean to say you were predictable or anything.
She shook her head and groaned.
Maybe it's my turn to stop talking.
He gave a nervous laugh. It seems we make quite the mess together. Well, when we're actually together. Not that we're actually, together. I mean, because I didn't mean for this to be a date. Not that I wouldn't want...
Timothy!
She exclaimed, her face bright red.
Just stop talking.
In the awkward silence that followed, she couldn't keep from laughing.
You're just too much sometimes, you know that?
Her laughter was contagious, and soon Timothy was buckling over in his seat as well.
I thought a play would be safe,
he exclaimed, wiping the tears from his eyes.
I thought we wouldn't have to talk.
He tried in vain to settle down and sit back up.
Quiet,
she said, stifling her own giggles.
You're making a scene.
Some stern faces turned towards them. He laughed even harder.
Oh no, they're going to throw us out of the theater. Then stop laughing, she pleaded,
still giggling uncontrollably.
You're making me laugh.
It took a while for the laughing and giggling to subside. It was odd how something so small and strange could have made them laugh so hysterically. It was as if, upon entering the theater, they had each silently agreed to leave their worries behind, to drop the disappointments of the day at the door. And as the laughter came to an end, the murmuring of voices replaced by music, Saphira felt absolutely content. Her eyes met Timothy's.
Thank you,
she whispered. He offered another smile before looking back to the stage, watching as the curtain began to rise. Throbbing, pounding pain. His head hurt. He kept his eyes shut and hoped the ache would go away. But the nausea took over as soon as his mind began to clear. He opened his eyes. It was dark. He blinked once, twice, but there was nothing to see. He was on the ground. He could feel cold stone beneath his hands, but it was pitch black wherever he turned. There was a moan. Strange, unfamiliar at first. But when it came again, Bellator's heart gave a leap. Still too shaky to stand, he crawled along the floor towards the sound. But he was forced to a stop. His hand hit a wall. Or was it a door? Struggling to his feet, he reached for a hold and found the handle. He pulled it as he stood, but the door didn't open. His fingers slipped from the metal, his head started to swim, and he fell back to the ground. His clothes were damp, it was hot and humid. He leaned against the wall and fought for air. Another moan, behind the door. Fletcher. He could hear his own breathing, the sound from a pump in the adjacent room. But he could also hear something moving on the other side. And then a voice. Jacob. He sighed. I thought we agreed never to. That doesn't matter now. None of it does. More shuffling. Do you remember what happened? He shut his eyes, thinking. It only took a moment. Where is he? Are you all right? He heard her sigh. I can't. Her voice was quiet, but she was close, just on the other side. Listen, Jacob, you have to get out. You have to get out now. It's locked. He tried to keep his voice steady, tried to hide his panic. Can you open it from the other side? I can't. My leg. Another pause. I can't move. You have to break the door down. The nausea came back with a vengeance. I can't stand up. I can't even. You have to get out. You have to get everyone out. I smell smoke. Her voice was shaking now. Jacob, please. He fought against the nausea and pulled himself back up. He could smell it now. Smoke. Fire. He reached out and felt the walls. Even behind him there wasn't much room. This isn't going to work. Make it work. She raised her voice. The pump in the alcove was louder than before. Break it down! Without a running start, he didn't have a chance. But he took a deep breath and charged anyway, his shoulder colliding with the door. Once he went, with no success. Twice, again, nothing moved. A third time he lunged forward, but as his shoulder hit the door, he heard something pop. He cried out and fell to the ground. My arm! Get up! She was yelling now, desperate. Kick the door! Don't run into it! I can't, Jacob! Clutching his shoulder, he rose again. Shaky, uncertain. He backed away and started kicking. Below the latch, aim for the weak point. He kicked, kept kicking. His attacks were sloppy, unfocused. Once he felt the door weaken, but nothing after that. I can't do it! Now he was yelling, the sweat from his forehead stinging his eyes. It was all he could do to stay on his feet. Keep trying! The pump was getting louder, the smell of smoke thick in the air. Her voice caught in her throat and came out as a gasp. He's doing it again! Jacob, he's using the pump! He couldn't understand what she was saying. He could only hear terror. He's going to kill them! The pain in his shoulder was forgotten. The heat, the fear, the panic took over. He placed his hands on the wall opposite the door, and then he started kicking. Get out! You have to warn them! Blind, he kicked. No thinking, no feeling. Break down the door! Get to the theater! He felt it, the door giving way. He was close. Break down the damn door! One more time. He shut his eyes and screamed. Hi, I'm your narrator, Miranda Eastwood, also the author of The Truth About Goblins. If you liked this chapter, remember to add, follow, or subscribe to this channel so you can hear the next one. And if you didn't like this chapter, oh well, I can't really do anything about that. In any case, I just thought I'd let you know about my Patreon. You can check it out if you'd like to throw some support my way. It would mean a lot to me. Not to mention there's loads of extra exclusive content that I only post on Patreon. While I'm at it, I'll mention that The Truth About Goblins is now available as a complete audiobook, and you can get it wherever you get your audiobooks. Thanks for listening.